Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our LinkedIn Live discussion today. I'm Victoria Sullivan, and I'm really excited to have two of my colleagues here with me today, Danielle Margatak and Britt Robertson. The three of us are going to be talking about a specific area in patient recruitment, recruiting for pediatric clinical trials. It's an area that not a lot of patient recruitment companies work in, but AutoCruitment has recruited patients in more than 30 pediatric studies, and there are definitely some nuances to being able to find patients for those trials. One of those nuances is that you're not really recruiting the patient, you're recruiting the parents, family, or caregiver. And that's why Britt, AutoCruitment's head of HR, is going to give us some perspective on today. Britt's son participated in a clinical trial as an infant, and she'll be talking about her experience in doing that. We'll also talk to Danielle, our head of service delivery and engagement, to hear how AutoCruitment thinks about pediatric recruitment and what we focus on for supporting and engaging this particular population. So let's jump in. Britt, tell us a little bit about your experience participating in a clinical trial as a parent.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. Sure. I think I've been a pretty open book about this since starting my role here, and it was actually a key driver in my decision to join the team. When my son was an infant, he received a challenging diagnosis that required that he undergo a major life-changing surgery. And so, about 4 days prior to surgery, we received a call from his care team that he was being invited to participate in a clinical trial that may provide better outcomes related to his surgery. And so, just to take you back, post diagnosis, my husband and I went straight into data mode, right, with the goal to get as much data as we possibly could to make the best decisions for our child. Where to have surgery, when, how to get the best possible surgeon, all of those things. And it was really decision after decision after decision, and not a single one of them was easy. And so, think about this, right? We had finally come to terms with the fact that our little guy, who'd become the center of our world, would need such an invasive surgery. And we finally made all of the decisions necessary to have it scheduled. And now we were faced with yet another decision whether or not he should participate in a clinical trial, with the hopes that we were making the right choice on his behalf. And we had a very short window in which to make that final choice.
Yeah. At that time, do you remember thinking there was something you wish you would have had or something along those lines?
I don't have any regrets about anything. I think it's a good question. Ultimately, it was a really positive outcome for us, and so we're very fortunate in that regard. But I can tell you that as a caregiver making an extremely impactful decision, it would have been nice to have a better understanding of the full suite of treatment options available that could potentially enhance my child's outcome. And had I not received a call from the surgeon a few days prior, I wouldn't have had the benefit of being able to consider this option for my child.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we hear from our parents when they're talking with our engagement team, they really want enough information so that they can feel confident, but that is jumping ahead just a little bit. Now that you work for AutoCruitment, do you have a different view on clinical trials? You've seen it from another angle, the angle of a parent. So if you think about what you know now, what would you have thought to be helpful as a first-time trial participant parent yourself?
I'm fortunate in that I've always been in the pharma and biotech space. And so, even with only a couple of days to make a decision, I did have access to a network of medical professionals that I'd worked with that were willing to provide me with support, knowledge, and guidance. Now, not everyone has that benefit. And I think joining the auto recruitment team has opened my eyes to the notion that there is a better way. There's a better way to get information to caregivers faster. There's a better way to ensure that they're informed about potential trials that may enhance their child's outcomes. And there's a way to ensure that they are supported throughout the process as they make some of the hardest decisions that they may ever be faced with. Then I think if I can just add, one of the best things about working at Auto Recruitment is that the people that work here really seem to get that.
Yeah, Brett, I really appreciate you sharing your story and the perspective with our audience today. Something that stands out for me is how fortunate it was that you were to have resources in the industry that you can lean on, especially because you didn't have the benefit of time to make a decision on your side. AutoCruitment's direct-to-patient recruitment and engagement approach is really great for patients or caregivers who don't have that type of access, and that's where Danielle's team comes into play. Danielle, AutoCruitment has a ton of experience recruiting for pediatric clinical trials. What do you think is unique about recruiting a pediatric cohort?
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. A pediatric cohort is really unique. It's really more about ensuring that the caregivers have understanding and education. So if we first start with understanding, for AutoCruitment to support pediatric clinical trials, we have to deeply understand the patient and the caregiver. Additionally, there's also even more regulatory considerations in targeting patients for clinical trials. You can't just put the study directly in front of a child. So you're trying to be in front of the family and in front of the key decision makers in that child's life. We also know that the messaging needs to focus on positive messaging and finding support. If you think about an example of a parent hearing about their child's behavior challenges in school, maybe from a teacher, the parent will probably go online and start engaging in content related to discipline or what's normal for a young child having behavioral issues. They may even start reviewing attention issues or ADHD treatment options. AutoCruitment would focus on this parent with IRB-approved ads that would inform them of clinical trials in ADHD that would be an option for them. And so now the parent knows about this and they would start engaging with our content and our team to learn more about this potential treatment option. Second is education. So you have to educate the caregiver, and that starts even before the caregiver knows the specifics of the trial. You have to help build awareness of clinical trials and make the options known to the caregiver. There's just a lot of people that don't think about clinical trials as a potential treatment option. The benefit of AutoCruitment's approach is that we place ads so that we create awareness and help find the patients to let them know that trials are even an option. Our AI-powered targeting approach can place our ads in front of parents that may already be online, searching and engaging in content that's related to their child's disease. So we know they want to see this type of information. And then there's the education that we get into around the trial specifics.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to ask about. As a delivery leader, how do you encourage your team to think about supporting parents and caregivers throughout the recruitment process?
Absolutely. There's definitely a different level of consideration for parents and caregivers, as there's just an extra level of complexity. The education component becomes more prevalent when we're supporting pediatric trials, because not only are we screening for the child's condition, we're also ensuring that the caregivers have all the information they need to be able to make an informed decision for their child. As Britt mentioned, parents go into data mode. So while we're not providing information about all of the possible solutions, caregivers rely on us to provide information about this specific trial. And we're forthcoming with that information so that they can be as comfortable as they can as they make those decisions. If we think about our engagement team, our patient engagement team talks to parents directly. They educate them on the protocol, what their child's participation would mean for them and for their family. So it's extremely comprehensive support. And then on the site engagement side, our team reaches directly out to the sites to ensure alignment on anticipated patient referrals and customize the support that they need from AutoCruitment to be able to handle the referrals that are going to come to their sites. And we know ultimately that we're catering to the family. If a parent's biggest concern is not to disrupt a school schedule, for example, we'll connect them with a site over the summer. We really want to understand how we engage with them best and what would make their participation in this trial easier and overall a positive experience for them. And the feedback that we've received on this level of support from caregivers, sponsors, and site is that it's tremendously helpful.
That's amazing. Can you share an impact that that's had on a result of the clinical trials that AutoCruitment has supported?
Absolutely. So we see that when our patient engagement team is involved, parents are contacted 62% faster and seen in office 40% faster. We know how important it is to engage with family quickly so that their interest in participating is maintained, and we can provide support early on. Conversion to randomization is also better. So when the engagement team is involved, we see that patients randomize at a 28% higher rate than if the sites were operating without our support.
Excellent. And are you also able to share a particular condition or regions where AutoCruitment has supported these pediatric studies?
Sure, absolutely. We've supported 33 pediatric studies across dozens of indications. We have multiple ongoing studies in the CNS space in conditions like ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. We have a long-standing history of experience in the GI space, but we're also currently heavily focused on supporting cardiovascular and metabolic conditions such as obesity and diabetes. In terms of geography, we've recruited pediatric patients specifically in 8 different countries, but AutoCruitment has done done studies in 38 different countries worldwide.
Excellent. Is there one major thing that you think sponsors and sites need to focus on for their pediatric recruitment?
I think that you just have to approach it with a different mindset. The strategy for an adult trial is totally different than that for a pediatric centric trial. First, finding the patients is different. You have to understand the patient, and that's the child, but you also have to understand the caregiver. And you have to understand that the caregiver's concern for their child and for themselves is hugely important. Then supporting them through the process looks different as well. Everyone needs and deserves the same level of care and engagement, but it's applied in a very different way with pediatric trials. We've supported, as I mentioned, more than 30 pediatric trials, and we've also randomized over 3,400 patients. And while every trial and every interaction is unique, the truth is that caregivers just want to understand and they want to feel comfortable, and we really tailor our focus to that. Sponsors and sites, they need to look at recruitment and engagement strategies that acknowledge the caregiver's central role in recruitment. We also know that regardless of condition, earlier and more thoughtful engagement improves conversion rates. So we see that the time from first contact goes from 8 days to 3 days, and the time from first visit goes from 5 weeks to 3 weeks with our support when it's on board. So this means that patients are randomizing into trials faster and at a higher rate.
And of course, that's the goal for the trial sponsors, getting patients to trials and bringing treatments to the patients who really ultimately need them.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, we are at about time, so I'll wrap this up. I want to thank both Danielle and Britt for joining me for this conversation today. Hope that everybody was able to pick up on a few insights and the nuances about recruiting pediatric patients, and we're so thankful for the time that you spent with us today. We didn't have enough time for questions on this session, so members of the AutoCruitment team will be in touch with everybody to share some more information or answer any questions you do have. And of course, feel free to visit autocruitment.com to get in touch with us or leave a message on our LinkedIn. Thank you again, everyone.